Body language is a complete and total pseudoscience. Is what you say if you know better and aren't paying attention and simply believe what the news tells you. I'd like to talk today about Daniel Penny. A few weeks ago, he was totally and completely acquitted of all wrongdoing in the death of Jordan Neely. In that situation, when the first responders arrived, Neely, of course, was still alive, but they refused, the first responders, they refused to engage in any kind of medical attention that would have prevented death. So there's negligence, it seems, at the very least, possibly criminal negligence at the very worst, but that's not for me to decide. That's entirely opinion. What I want to talk to you about is the nonverbal persuasion of Daniel Penny. I suggest you watch interviews of his. He is a masterclass in frame. Notice his posture. He stands tall, chin up, sometimes upwards like this. He has the same facial expression almost regardless. If you go and look at when he was first arrested, to the trial, to clips of media that came out, interviews of his that came out prior to, interviews of his afterwards, when he was in the bar celebrating afterwards, after he was totally and completely acquitted of all wrongdoing. Of course, there were some smiles there. But other than that, and that smiles of relief and celebration, getting his life back, you'll notice he held frame, calm, cool, collected, ice in his veins, you might say. That could come from the experience of the United States Marine Corps and that training. You'll notice that veterans and even active service members, men, have the same, let's say, posture, the same poise. It's a sort of trained frame, I'll call it. Not breaking frame. Now, people will often ask, what do you mean by frame? What does that word mean? Well, have you ever played that game, maybe when you were a kid? That frame game where the goal was to try to break the other person out of their locked down expression of showing no emotion and keeping an even keel, calm, cool voice. And the game was to try to make the other person laugh by doing something. And the goal was that the other person do something silly, the other child, and then you just kind of sit there observing normal. And if you lost frame or broke frame, then that meant that you were laughing or reacting in some way, snorting, chuckling, chortling. Of course, we see a lot of parents lose frame very quickly with their young children who are misbehaving or causing some sort of a ruckus. And the child might be whining or crying about something, acting upset, acting a little slappy. And then the parent will go from 0 to 100 and scream louder than the child, get angrier than the child, overwhelm the child, engage in a manipulation technique called emotional flooding that totally overwhelms the child, flooding them with emotions of the parent to try to make them stop. More naturally, let's say, compliant children will, but more strong-willed children will not. They will up the ante, and then it becomes a disastrous conflict by age 11, 12, 13. If it's in a conservative family, the child will become a raging leftist and blue-haired, possibly alter their gender permanently, if so, as a form of rebellion against their parents. If it's a conservative, or if it's a more liberal family, well, then they'll become extremely conservative and start wearing Trump hats everywhere to family dinners, right? This is a dynamic that you sort of see, this sort of rebellion. Teenage rebellion is not a natural phenomenon. What is natural is independence from mom and dad and creating your own identity. Well, the trouble is that authoritarian parenting, frame-free parenting, where they break frame, they don't engage in Daniel Penny parenting, is the consequence of that is the child sees the parents as enemies. That's not what we want. Hold frame with your kids. And I believe that holding frame and not losing his cool, not getting upset, not getting angry is ultimately what may have helped in the persuasion of the jury. in addition to the shenanigans and nonsense that the judge tried to pull, the prosecutor tried to pull to try to get a conviction on one of the two charges, if not both of them, right? There was some serious legal precedent that was upturned during that trial. Other people wiser than me, like the legal analyst Michael Cernovich, he said some things about this I think that are worth looking into. Others have as well, like the attorney Will Chamberlain. Both have great takes on this. But the point here is I'd like you to contrast this Dana Penny experience to Brett Kavanaugh, the Supreme Court justice, during his confirmation hearing. And when there were points where he got really, really angry, that worked against him. Now, ultimately, he was confirmed, but every single feminist, female and male feminist in the United States believes that he is guilty. They believes that he is a predator. Why? Well, the accusation, of course, but losing frame is anti-persuasive. And he acted in such a way as to confirm the bias. That's how a predator acts when they're cornered. They lash out. They get angry. I knew it. So unfortunately, anti-persuasion confirms suspicion. Remember we talked about confirming suspicions in a previous video here? You don't want to confirm suspicions. Unfortunately, that is exactly what Brett Kavanaugh did, and there are still a percentage of people today who believe that he needs to be removed from the Supreme Court somehow, some way, or possibly pack the Supreme Court. That is, of course, what one of the promises of the Kamala Harris campaign was early on before they got caught and there was an outrage. Most of her stuff she talked back in order to not get in trouble with granting voting rights to illegal immigrants, together with amnesty and more money, free housing, free healthcare, free everything, banning all firearms. These were things that she had promised, of course. But once push came to shove, oh, no, actually, I own a firearm. And she had that weird wine ant cackle. It is what it is. Fortunately, that is over and done with. And we will not be hearing from her in public life for quite some time, if ever again. Same for the effeminate Tim Walz, whom we talked about yesterday. All right, I think that wraps it up for you. The point is that when you are in an emotionally tense situation, the best thing you can do is put your Daniel Penny face on. Calm, cool, collected, when it counts. Because if you act like nothing is wrong, people will think nothing is wrong. This is the power of frame, the power of persuasion in poise and nonverbal behaviors. People will say, obviously, Josh, nonverbal language isn't real, or nonverbals and body language reading, like that's all fake. It's not real. Well, it just might have saved this man's life.